Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it. Diane got up early today, tidied up the area she'd been entrusted with, and now rushed full steam ahead to the store. Every Thursday they put out the stale stuff. She had long ago become accustomed to doing so. It was convenient and not at all expensive. Suddenly on the road, closer to the unfinished house, a squeak was heard from the bushes. The woman was surprised. Who is there? Again, some monsters decided to get rid of the animal. What kind of people? Nothing sacred left. Without thinking, she rushed over there to see who was squeaking so pitifully. When she saw the basket with the newborn baby, she was speechless. Diane stood still and did not know what to do. In her head, she thought, poor baby. What kind of a scoundrel has abandoned her? The woman picked up the baby, and she began to hum and smile. Beneath her, on a diaper, lay a note. Diane wasted no time in reading it and rushed home with the baby. She decided that whatever happens, first it is necessary to feed the little runaway and warm her up. On the way, she ran into a store and bought a pack of baby food, a bottle, and a pacifier. She was all banged up. What if someone guesses that I am carrying someone else's baby? Maybe they're already looking for the baby. The passers-by and visitors to the store completely ignored the poorly dressed woman with a baby. Who cares? At home, Diana changed the girl's diaper. The spare was in the basket, fed the baby, and she snoozed sweetly, warm under a warm blanket. At last, the woman opened the note. There, in beautiful, smooth handwriting, was written, "I'm sorry I can't take care of my daughter anymore. I don't have the strength or the money." And that was it. No girl's name, no papers, nothing. Diane sat down on the couch and thought frantically about what to do next. She was shaking and hot. The blood rushed to her temples. Should she run to the police and give up someone else's child out of harm's way? Drop her off at an orphanage? Or take a chance and keep her, raise her as my own? After all, this is such a chance to become a mommy. It was as if fate itself had helped. Diana decided to take the risk because it was impossible to tear herself away from the baby. She smelled so sweetly of breast milk and babyhood. She smiled so sincerely and serenely, and surprisingly was very calm. The woman named the girl Jeannie. It was so symbolic, because it was her appearance that brought the woman back to life, gave her hope for motherhood. And just yesterday, she had not had the slightest chance. While the baby was sleeping, Diana ran to the closest thrift store and bought not new but pretty baby things, food, diapers, and even a small bathtub for bathing. In the evening, Diane stoked the stove in her old house and began to bathe Jeannie, crying tears of joy as she touched the tiny hands and feet, splashed warm water on her, and washed the baby. Jeannie looked about 6 months old. She could already sit up a little by herself and was humming merrily. Diana cradled her, sang a lullaby, and when the baby fell asleep, she lay down and remembered her past. Diana did not have a happy childhood, and to be honest, there was no childhood at all, only a struggle for survival among the same destitute, unhappy children of the orphanage. She remembered only some vague, scary scraps of her own family. Cries of her half-drunk mother. There she was, crying in some shabby corner, begging pitifully for food. And her stepfather's hard hand hitting her on the back of the head. Diana was taken from a dysfunctional family. Her mother drank all the time, brought home men, and the child never had any normal food or clothes. The girl wandered around in miserable rags and begged the neighbors for food, for which she regularly got a scolding. In the end, the compassionate residents could not stand it and called the police and child welfare services. So, at the age of 4, Diana ended up in an orphanage. Of course, it wasn't easy there either with its wolf laws, but at least she was fed and clothed. The girl was very calm and diligent. She studied well, so she was loved by her teachers, but hated by her peers. They teased her mercilessly and didn't call her out with them. They were afraid she would report everything to the adults. Diana hated the orphanage so much that she marked every day with a circle in a calendar given by her nurse and waited until she was 18. She didn't like her looks either. She was thin, hungry, angular, and a little awkward, with red hair and a nose full of pimples. Although Dexter, the janitor, had repeatedly admired the girl. "Oh, Diane, what beautiful hair you have, just look like the sun. It dazzles the eye." She only frowned. "That's my sunshine. Everybody teases her with red hair. I'm sick of it." The old man just waved his hand. "They're stupid. They don't understand anything. Don't pay attention. It will soon pass." After leaving the orphanage, Diana was given a shabby house on the outskirts of the city. But she was glad she had her own place. The girl started looking for a job, but they did not take her anywhere without experience and education, so she had to waitress in a cafe. Diana did her best during the internship, didn't get lazy, ran around like an angel, and soon she was accepted. She met her future husband, Jimmy, when the construction crew came to the place to do some renovation. One of them, a black-haired, gypsy-looking man with eyes as black as embers, immediately began to show signs of attention. He took a fancy to the pretty and mischievous red-haired girl. She was like a bright sun, so the young people began to date and then modestly married. Jimmy was not rich. His father had raised him alone. They lived modestly, but the boy had golden hands. He had so transformed and patched up Diana's cottage that their family nest had become very cozy. The couple lived amicably and hardly ever quarreled. And soon, to their mutual happiness, Diana became pregnant. How happy they were. What plans they made, it seemed that everything was wonderful, and life ahead was absolutely cloudless. On that fateful day, nothing foretold trouble. Our heroine did not even have any premonition. Her husband went to the village to get a board. The family planned to make a new fence, since the old one was completely crooked. Diana kissed her husband on the cheek, as usual, and ran off to work. In the evening after her shift, she was taken aback her husband was still not home. A bad feeling lingered. What could have happened? Maybe the truck broke down or something else happened on the road. But then, all the more so, Jimmy would surely have called her and warned her. She panicked and started calling his cell phone, but it was off. Then she couldn't stand it and called the police and morgues. That's where Jimmy was found. He had been in a terrible car accident on the road and had crashed to his death. From there, everything happened as in a terrible dream. A funeral, strangers crying, condolences, and unbearable sadness and pain inside. Diane cried all the time, so a month after the funeral, she had a miscarriage. Bleeding started right in the middle of the night. She barely had time to call an ambulance. The doctors fought for her life for a long time, but they did not save the baby. Moreover, they brought an infection. A strong inflammation began, and the woman spent almost 2 weeks in the hospital. But that's not all of the misfortune that befell poor Diana. The doctors regretfully gave her the awful news. Unfortunately, for health reasons, you will not be able to have any more children. We're so sorry. Diana waddled home from the hospital, wishing she could just shut herself away and cry. But when she arrived at her house, she was dumbfounded. There was ashes instead of her home. Everything had burned to the ground. Her belongings, her furniture, the walls were charred, and there was no roof at all. The neighbors said that according to the firemen, the old wiring was to blame, because the house must have been 100 years old. Diane now had no idea where to go or where to live. She unsuccessfully pounded on the doorsteps of the administration. She was put on a waiting list for an apartment, and that was it. No one even offered her any temporary housing. The officials kept repeating one thing: the house was not a wreck. Therefore, we are not obliged to resettle you. Well, there are some relatives, acquaintances. Live with them for now. Or rent a house. Poor woman rushed to his cafe, grasping at this chance as a straw. And maybe indeed rent a room when I get my salary, and meanwhile live at a neighbor. But that was a fiasco too. While she was burying her husband and lying in hospital, someone else was hired to take her place. They didn't even bother to call and tell her about it. Diana begged her boss and showed him the certificate from the hospital, but it was all in vain. The woman was working unofficially, which meant that no one owed her anything, and there was nowhere to complain either. Just like that, overnight, by the will of an evil fate, Diana was left without a husband and a child, and without a roof over her head, and without a roof over her head, and without a job. No one, not even in a nightmare, could not dream of all the misfortunes of the world suddenly fell on his head. Diana was at her wit's end, and no desire to live. She wandered aimlessly with a detached look on the streets all day long, looking at the faces of passers-by, and secretly envied them. Everyone was in a hurry to get somewhere, and there was someone waiting for everyone at home. In the evening, she would sit on some bench like a stray dog and look out of other people's windows, where lights were burning, people were scurrying, and families were living in the midst of the world. And she was like a scum of society, needless in this world. Diana begged for alms and drank bitter. It was the only way she could forget herself for a few hours. She spent nights at the train station, then on benches. Sometimes they let her in the staircase. But one day, she dreamt of Jimmy in a drunken stupor. He was wagging his finger at her and scolding her. "Don't you dare go soft. What have you become, eh? That's not who you are." Diana woke up to the cold rain drumming directly on her face, and her body all stiff from the hard bench. She cried, then screamed, turning to the heavens. "How did you want it? How do you expect me to live? Where? Why? Why? Why did you leave me alone? And don't you dare shame me. Nobody wants me. I'll go and hang myself from that tree right now, and you'll know it." "I want you? Why should I live? For whom? For what?" At the same second it thundered so that the woman's ears seized up. A bright flash of lightning illuminated the sky and struck directly at the same ill-fated poplar. It immediately split in half. It rained so hard that nothing could be seen at all. Terrified, Diana fell to her knees, began to cross herself, and whispered, "Forgive me, Andrew. Forgive me, my love. I understand everything. From this day on, I won't drink a drop more. Just don't be angry." The next morning, the woman decided to start her life anew. She looked for an abandoned house on the outskirts of town, asked her neighbors if she could live there. Babamon only waved her hand. "Live it up." Dominic lived here, God rest his soul. He had no relatives, no one, so after his death the house is empty. If it was more decent, looters would have stolen it. But as it is, who needs it? It's not a house, it's just a name. There are windows in the ground already. "What's your name? Why are you a vagabond?" Diana honestly told her grandmother the whole truth. She did not hold back anything. The latter sympathized, and even packed her some clothes and food. She said, "Here, take this old bedding, curtains, and things left by her daughter. She's too young and not fashionable. It'll come in handy. Don't worry. God willing, somehow everything will work out." Diana almost cried. "Thank you for your kind heart. I will settle in." The woman rolled up her sleeves and began to diligently clean up the mess and put the house in order. It took her a couple of weeks for sure. The neighbors liked this poor but very friendly, clean and hard-working red-headed woman, and they began to feed her and help her out a little. Diana even managed to get a job as a janitor in a nearby neighborhood, and now she was getting at least some money. There was no more groveling and begging. For the coming summer, she dreamed of plowing a long, overgrown, weedy vegetable garden and planting potatoes. She tried to buy expired groceries. It was cheaper that way. After the death of her husband, Diana did not even think about living with someone. He was firmly in her heart. She often dreamed about him and believed that he was somewhere near her. One thing did not give the woman peace. She would never be a mother. Often early in the morning, sweeping the yards, Diana found other parents leading their children to kindergartens and schools, instructing them, gently correcting their clothes and holding their hands tightly. Her heart ached. She desperately wanted to love and cherish her child the same way, to hold and cuddle. At night, the woman howled loudly into the pillow from longing for her husband and loneliness. She even thought of taking an orphan child like herself. But who would let a homeless woman do such a thing? She was lucky to have her documents with her in the hospital. Otherwise, they would have been burned to ashes. She had Jimmy's picture in her passport, and she kept it as a keepsake, cherished it, and often admired it. And now, looking at the sniffling in the chair, Diana firmly decided for herself. She would not give it to anyone, and so be it. She was finally a mommy. How great was that? Well, let's say I take her to the police. What would Jeannie expect? The horrors of an orphanage. You wouldn't want that. But this way I'll love her. I won't let anyone hurt her. I won't let anyone hurt her. I'll starve myself, and I'll raise Ginny with dignity. How can I get her papers? Otherwise, nothing will work out. The very next day, Diana washed her face, combed her hair, packed up her little girl, and went with her to the child welfare office. She started crying and saying, "Help me. This is my daughter, Jeannie. She's 6 months old. I need to register her. Get a birth certificate." Staff looked at me and opened their mouths. "How so? May I? You didn't give birth to her in a maternity hospital. You are not registered. How is this even possible in the 21st century? Are you out of your mind?" Diana answered quietly, "Yes, I was not registered. I'm homeless, and I gave birth to her on the street." "And what, you can't?" "That's my business. But now I have a roof over my head, and I want to raise my daughter normally. So will you help me? She can't really live without papers, can she?" The staff deliberated and decided to help the poor guy. She did not seem to drink, though poorly dressed, but neat. No smell. The child is well, nourished, quiet. Well, no matter what, but still a mother. All the paperwork took a few months, and finally they wrote the woman's documents, but warned her strongly, "Don't forget to register your child at the clinic and come for regular checkups. It's free. Now, you are officially a mommy. You can go and get food for your baby in the dairy kitchen." "Good day." Diana glowed and began to thank them. "Thank you, good people. God bless you." She jumped out of the institution with her daughter. She was shaking all over. She couldn't believe her luck. "I can't believe it. No one is looking for Jeannie. Now I am her mother, and she an Anna by deed. Och, thank you, Jimmy. You must be the one from heaven who's been tending and helping for me. There's no one else." From that day on, Diane's life began to be very different. Sometimes she cried. Then she'd run with her to the dairy, get food, then to the store, then do everything around the house. It was very hard, sometimes falling off her feet, but after a whimper from her beloved girl, tiredness vanished as by magic, and Diana was ready for new accomplishments. 7 years flew by with such care. Acquaintances and neighbors often joked and wondered when Janisha was still a baby. "Diana, where did you get a baby from? You didn't even see a belly. What a quiet girl." She just smiled. "I found it in a cabbage. It's my daughter, don't doubt it. Just the tummy was very small, and that no one and did not notice." Janisha grew up smart, obedient, and curious girl. She loved to read, draw, and gladly helped her mother with household chores. This year her daughter went to 1st grade, and Diana spent the entire summer selling vegetables from the vegetable garden, scrubbing floors and sweeping, hired to pull weeds to get her ready for school in a dignified manner. She was so proud that Ginny was as good as anyone else, and a new uniform, and a briefcase. For the 1st of September, Diane borrowed a beautiful dress from a neighbor so the child wouldn't be ashamed of her mother. Nabdianaya at the line, as her favorite daughter boyishly and without mistakes read poetry, which they studied together. The woman even cried from the excess of feelings. Gosh, how great it is to be a mom after all. It's a good thing no one ever looked for Ginny, so she really was deliberately abandoned. I feel better. And not long ago, she and Ginny had another new tenant in the house. The little girl came home from school and mysteriously asked her mother, "Mommy, won't you scold me if I show you something?" At the same time, the little girl stomped in the hallway and did not take off her jacket, hiding something in her pocket. From there came a squeak. The woman asked in surprise, "Come on, show me who you have crying." "Just wondering." Child carefully pulled out from the sinus of a small, skinny gray kitten. It timidly looked around and cried pitifully, afraid of a strange and unfamiliar environment. The girl gibbered. "You see, Mom, the boys found him at the gate of the school and began to hurt, and the harmful hand even tied a tin can to his tail. I felt so sorry for him. I barely fought them off the kitten. Well, how to leave him alone? They'll start beating him again. Let's keep him, please." Diana took the kitten in her arms. "What do I mind? On the contrary, I am proud that I have such a kind and sympathetic daughter. Save the poor baby. Now I'll give him milk." "What are you going to name your pet?" Janisha happily replied. "Let's call him Purr." Feck. They poured warm milk for the kitten. He eagerly drank it, climbed into the arms of his daughter, and blissfully fell asleep, curled up in a ring and soaking in the warmth. The girl smiled, scratched his ear, and whispered, "Sleep, my little Purr. Now no one will hurt you. I will not give offense to you. You will catch mice when you grow up." Diane called Ginny in for dinner. "Ducha, wash your hands and go eat. The soup is getting cold." The little girl put her finger to her lips as a sign of silence. "I can't. Merchik just fell asleep." "Do not swear, Mommy." "Well, how do I get him off my lap? Now I'll just sit with him for a little while longer, and then I'll come, okay?" Diane smiled, stroked the baby on the head, and said, "All right, sit, my dear. We'll warm her up later." And so the three of them began to live together. Perchik was a mischievous and affectionate kitten. He and his daughter raced playing ball and string with a candy wrapper tied to it, and in the evenings the kitten petted and purred at their owner's feet, and their home became much more comfortable with the pet. One day Diana had just come home from work and was fussing over the kitchen because their daughter was to come home from school soon, and they needed to prepare dinner and heat the stove. Purr, Fecht, was running around, jumping up and down and begging for something tasty, smelling the food. Suddenly she saw through the window a motorcade of cars pulling up to the house. A man got out of the car and knocked on the tiny window, and then on the gate. The disturbed woman looked out cautiously and was dumbfounded. Jimmy's late husband was standing in front of her and saying, "Good afternoon. Your name is Diane, isn't it? I'm Victor, your daughter, Ginny's real father. I want to see her. May I come in? We need to talk." Diana recoiled, turned white as chalk, and began to cross herself and wail. "Andrew, my darling, aren't you dead? How could it be?" And the woman suddenly fainted, right on the doorstep. She woke up to someone slapping her cheeks and splashing her with cold water. The man was even sweating and took off his expensive cashmere coat. "Fool, thank God. You're awake. Is that any way to scare a man?" "I'm not Jimmy. What makes you think that?" "My name is Victor. You must have me confused with someone else. Are you out of your mind?" Diana rubbed the bruised back of her head and began to explain. "I'm not crazy, don't think so. But you look just like my late husband. Just the same face. I'll show you a picture." She took a picture of Jimmy from under the cover of her passport and gave it to the stranger. He stared at it dumbfoundedly, changing his face. Then he said, "That's just impossible. It really looks just like me. We have to find out. Such coincidences simply do not happen. Yeah, I can see why you reacted the way you did. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Where's the girl? I'll explain everything. She's my daughter. Diane muttered. Find out what you want. It's up to you. But know this. I'm not giving Jeannie to you. She's my daughter on paper. That's it. She's all I live for. Go on, get out of here. I'm talking and I've got soup to make. Have a nice day. She drove the uninvited guest out and closed the door in his face, while she herself became very worried. Oh, he fell on my head. Almost gave me a heart attack. I thought my dead husband had come back from the dead, and he wants to take Guinea away. I don't even know if he's her father or not. Where's he been all these years? He's back in a hurry. Oh, no. I'm going to fight, and I'm not going to give my little girl up to anybody. I'm her mother on paper, and he's nobody. Soon Ganesha came in, chirping merrily about her progress. And she was munching on her soup, and Diana was melting, looking at her beloved treasure. Then they did their homework together and spent a long time agonizing with the unhealthy letter G, which never turned out beautifully. All this trouble was vital and pleasant to the woman. She seemed to be drunk with children's love. It gave her a huge incentive to live. Several days passed. It was Sunday, and Diane and her daughter were frolicking merrily in the yard, making a snow maiden. They were laughing because the carrot kept falling off and wouldn't stick up instead of its nose. A car pulled up to the house, and again the same stranger knocked on the door. But now he was alone, without a motorcade, holding a huge bag and a real fluffy Christmas tree. Instead of a greeting, Diane said unkindly, "You again. What more do you want? I told you last time. I think I made it clear." Victor did not react and said hello peacefully. "Hello, everyone. Can I visit you? I have gifts, almost like Santa Claus. Let me in." And he dashingly attached a carrot to the snowman in one motion. Ginny clapped her hands. "Oh, how great you've done. I'm Ginny, and this is my mom, Diana. I love presents. Mom, why are you mad at your uncle? Why don't we invite your uncle? Why don't we invite him over? He's nice. He brought us a real Christmas tree." Diana had nothing to do but wave. "Come on in. Don't let me upset your daughter." Victor quietly looked behind the woman and the child and admired them both. This red-haired, charming woman, despite the fact that she lived more than modestly, looked better than all those pompous beauties with whom he often had to communicate. She was flushed in the cold. Her green eyes burned with emeralds, and even under the voluminous lumbering jacket, you could see a great figure and Janisha. Such a doll, just a peek, you could see that she loves her mom very much. That's where the real family, not like mine. I've got money to burn, but what's the use? Ginny was nervous, called everyone to dinner, and set the table. She gestured for the man to be silent and not to bring up the point he had come to make in front of the child. For dinner, there was a big pan of fried potatoes and sauerkraut from the cellar, and for tea, fragrant pancakes with jam. But as the guests did not come empty-handed, the table was bursting with delicacies. Victor ate his dinner with pleasure and muttered, "Believe it or not, Diana, I can afford everything, from lobsters to black caviar. And I haven't had home fried potatoes in years. Thank you. They're delicious, and the cabbage is delicious. It's so crunchy." But the woman did not react to the compliments. Her mind was still spinning. Lord, what if he really Jin's father? That can be proven in no time. Everything would come out. The papers would be revoked, and Janny would be taken away. Not again. Lord, please don't let him take my daughter away from me. After lunch, the man began handing out gifts, Ganesha squealing with delight at the sight of a real, expensive Barbie doll and a huge bag of candy and sweets. Victor a small box in red and handed it to the woman. "This is for you. A nice present from the bottom of my heart." But Diana put it aside without even looking and whispered, I'm not Guinea, I'm not 7 years old. Don't try to placate me or buy me. I know why you're here. I know why you're here. I won't give you my daughter. Don't even dream of it. Let's decorate the tree so Guinea doesn't get upset. And please go away. Victor whispered too. Okay, I'll leave, but only after we talk. There's no other way. I have a lot to tell you. I hope that after this, you will change your mind. The next thing they did together was to decorate the fluffy Christmas tree, hang the toys and the raincoat that Victor had brought. Ginny was delighted with the colorful and shimmering balls, because all these years she and her mother had only a humble Christmas tree branch, which he decorated with candy and absorbent cotton. Then the little girl asked, "Mommy, can I run to Fiona for a minute? I need to tell her everything. I can't help it. She will be jealous, especially when she sees my Barbie. She certainly doesn't have one. She's still laughing at my old doll." Diana smiled. "Well, run. Just don't be long, so you'll be home for dinner. And do not dare to go for a walk yourself, especially on the river. The ice there is still thin. You can drown." Vil swore she would never go anywhere without asking, and rushed away happy to her best friend. The woman even sighed with relief and told her guest, "I'm all ears. You're about to tell everything you want and leave, only this time for good." He sat down on the sofa and quietly began. "It's going to be a long talk. I'll start in order and with Jenny. So my name is Victor. I am the son of a big businessman. Naturally, as a child, I had everything in abundance and more. My father is a very good man, but he raised me strictly. He made me study on my conscience and didn't allow me to do anything improper. But with my mother, I always had a very tense relationship. She seemed to hate me, treated me with coolness since childhood. I resented her. I didn't understand why this was so. When I was still at university, I met Alice. She was an orphan herself and worked at the local car wash. We were so in love, it was amazing, except my parents were against it. Or rather, my father was surprisingly neutral, saying that it was up to you, live your life the way you wanted. And my mom threw tantrums and tried by all means to break our relationship, but I went against it, and we decided with Alice to get married. Everything was going well, but a week before the wedding she disappeared, vanished, ran away. She didn't answer the phone. I looked everywhere for her, all in vain. That's the way it is. Many years have passed, and I still could not forget Alice. I do my favorite job, but my personal life is not improving at all. With whom I do not get acquainted. All not that. And recently my mother got very sick, a serious illness, so she decided to tell me the whole truth. It turns out that Alice did not run away at all. Just my mother came to our rental apartment and began to spin tales, as if I already have a fiancé and soon get married. And with Alice just for fun. Threatened her that she would ruin her life if she does not get out of my life forever. And all that. When I found out about it, I was so angry. I just couldn't stand it. I decided by all means to find out what happened to Alice. What was her fate? I thought, if it was not too late to go and apologize, to explain everything. I hired a private detective. He was the one who found out. He told me that after my mother kicked her out, Alice moved to the suburbs, rented a room at first, then found out that she was pregnant by me, had a baby. I even saw a record of it in the maternity ward. And then, according to my neighbors, the baby disappeared. No neighbors or acquaintances of my fiancé had seen it. Alice herself fell into a prolonged depression, started drinking, fell down, apparently against the backdrop of everything she'd been through, and then died, a drunken binge. The detective found her grave, and I'm taking care of her now. Well, he is a real professional, and made every effort to find his daughter. First, he checked all the orphanages. The girl was not there. Then he hypothetically suggested that Alice could just leave the child somewhere near the house. So, bit by bit, he found out that you, Diana, had a 6-month old daughter from somewhere, although the neighbors say you were not pregnant at all. It all adds up. We matched Alice's due date with when you had your daughter. The baby was just 6 months old. And considering that you lived very poor, and even in an abandoned house, the option of adoption is also out of the question. No one would have given you a baby, I'm sorry. So I'm pretty sure Jinisha is my daughter. And she looks just like me. Look at her. She has the same brown eyes and curly black hair. Only the nose and the shape of Alice's face. I can see that. I insist on a genetic examination. Let's do it so there's no doubt. Don't think I'm going to take your daughter away from you or challenge your maternity. That's what you're afraid of, isn't it? No. I just want to see my daughter, be part of her upbringing, help her. Would it be any worse for you? I can see how hard your life is. Is it good for a little girl to grow up in these conditions? Don't push me away, please. For you as well as for me, the appearance of a daughter in my life. It's such a ray of hope. Such a ray of hope. Such happiness. So don't take it away from me. Diana listened, did not interrupt, and was amazed. So poor Alice's fate is intertwined with her own. Only she didn't make it, couldn't, had stooped, abandoned her daughter out of despair, and perished. For some reason she felt unspeakably sorry for this poor broken woman. After all, in fact, it was not her fault. No one gave a helping hand in time. And Victor was not such a meanie. He didn't know anything. I was so hard on him the first time I kicked him out. She said quietly, I'm sorry, I didn't know all the details. Well, if it's true, then of course let's do a genetic analysis. But you do not think I did not steal the baby. I found her on the ground in a basket. So happy. I did not want to give her to an orphanage. I am an orphan myself, and I know how terrible and bad it is. And I was childless after a miscarriage, so I was happy to have a daughter. I don't argue. We don't live rich. It's true, but I try to buy her new things, even if they aren't cheap. I work as a janitor. I sell vegetables from the garden at the market, all for the sake of my little girl. I was not always a bum, too. I had a husband, Jimmy, and a house, and we fixed it up together. I got pregnant, and then she suddenly stopped and cried, her face covered with her hands, unable to cope with her memories. Victor quietly continued, I know. The detective told me all about you. I'm sorry. You also have such a difficult, fractured fate. Diana wiped away her tears and asked, So, what about the similarities between you and my dead husband? Did you manage to find out anything? It doesn't give me peace. Victor continued, Yes, I found out everything. My mother recently confessed everything. It turns out that before my father, she was already married and had twins, me and my brother. But soon she and her husband divorced and decided to divide everything amicably, including the children. Her first husband, Stas, had to leave town so my brother and I would never see each other again. Isn't that sacrilege? What kind of an idea is that? Separating the twins? Not to let us see each other? Not to communicate? But Stas did not live long in a strange city and soon returned home. So it turns out that your husband, Jimmy, was raised by his father alone, and they lived poorly, struggling from bread to water. And I was raised in luxury because my mother married my stepfather, a millionaire for the second time. When I found out about it, my hair on my head rose up in anger. I cannot forgive my mother. How could she not help her own son? Why did she not tell me anything? How could she have such a heart of stone to do such evil things, to break so many destinies at once, to eat every day for breakfast delicacies, and not to worry about whether my own son is not hungry now? You could just talk heart to heart as a human being. She confessed why she was not very warm to me as a child. I was a walking reminder of her sin. But what about now? She has cancer, and life goes on for months. So what's the point of making a claim? Apparently, This is payback for everything she's done. Diane was in shock. Tears were rolling down her cheeks. She was unable to get a word out. She kept looking at Victor and remembered her Jimmy. It seemed to her that here he was, right in front of her, alive. She thought of him. There he was, alive in front of her. She wanted to hold him, to cuddle him, as she had wanted him to ruffle her red curls and whisper, "You're my sunshine, you're my darling." It was not until late at night, when Jeannie was already asleep, that the woman took Victor's gift in her hands. She carefully unwrapped it and gasped. There was a stunning beauty mint, colored dress of a pleasant touch, very warm at heart, that Victor took care not only for her daughter, but also for her. She had already forgotten what attention from a man was, and she worried, "Here I am ungrateful. I didn't even say thank you." Victor had a genetic test done, and it confirmed that Jeannie was his daughter. From that moment on, Diane and Guinish's life turned upside down and became like some kind of beautiful fairy tale. The man bought a nice, comfortable apartment, especially for his daughter and Diana, and her moved there. The woman no longer worked as a janitor. Victor got her a job as a secretary in his firm. But first, like a storyteller or wizard, he worked on Diana's image and took her to a beauty salon, telling the girls, "Gentle ladies, your job is to make this woman feel as good as possible and do everything the way she wants." Oh my God. Diana felt like she was in heaven. She completely relaxed and entrusted herself to the skillful hands of the cosmetologist. She thought to herself, "Not long ago, I slept on a bench in the rain and thought my life was over. And now I'm in a fashionable salon, live in a luxury apartment, have a good job, and my favorite daughter. What an unpredictable thing life is." When the woman looked at herself in the mirror 2 hours later, she just gasped. Instead of 35-year-old, tired of life and hard work beggar, she saw a businesslike and respectable lady. She had her hair done nicely, her bangs trimmed, her face refreshed with a mask, and she had a daytime light makeup and a gentle manicure. In a nearby clothing salon, they picked up several dresses and stylish trouser suits, shoes and accessories to match. The woman had never felt so queenly. Victor, who was waiting for her in the car, even whistled when she finally got out of the salon. His heart raced at the sight of such a beauty. He couldn't help himself and said, "Oh, Diana, you look so beautiful. I think I'm in love, completely and irrevocably." The woman blushed. She was very pleased with compliments and responded, "Oh, well, say too, thank you for everything, Victor. You are like a genie, like a good wizard. You rushed into my and Jeannie's life and painted it with bright colors. You're the kind of father my daughter couldn't have dreamed of. She is so fond of you, so attached to you. Maybe it's time to tell her the truth." Victor took her hand and, looking into her eyes soulfully, said, "Diane, listen, our fates happen to be very closely intertwined with each other, and Jinisha tied them tightly together. What would you say to you and me becoming one family? I wouldn't mind. Ginny, I think so too. How about you? What do you say? I won't force it, of course, but I'd love to raise our daughter together. I miss her so much, and I'm literally counting the seconds until we meet again." The woman froze. Her legs even buckled. Victor, of course, she liked him madly since he was a replica of her late husband. And as a man, he was great, generous, caring, the kind of husband one could only dream of. Could it really be happening to her? She answered in a trembling voice, "I agree. Let's try it. I just need to prepare my daughter somehow how to tell her all this. I have no idea." Victor replied, "I'm an advocate of never lying to anyone, so you have to tell it like it is. Jeannie is a smart girl. I think she will understand everything." In the evening, after dinner, Victor made up his mind and walked over to Ginny, who was diligently trying to deduce the exercises, and said, "To Jinisha, Your mother and I need to talk to you. We decided to get married because I'm your real daddy. Mom and I love each other and we want to take care of you together. After all, you are our sunshine and favorite daughter. How do you feel about it? Diane tensely and anxiously watched the reaction of her daughter, afraid that she would misunderstand everything or be upset. But to her surprise, the little girl joyfully shouted and threw herself on Victor's neck. Hooray! I knew you were my daddy. You gave me such a beautiful doll for a reason, didn't you? Are we family now? How is everybody? That's great. Will I have grandparents too? Like everyone else? Victor laughed and kissed the baby on the cheek. And how? Right tomorrow, and let's go meet them. You have such a world grandfather. You will like him for sure. Diane exhaled with relief, smiled, and said, Well, family. Everyone wash your hands. Dinner is on the table. After you finish your homework, we'll all play bingo together. Who's for it? Everyone laughed, raised their hands, and went to dinner. It seemed to Diane the time had turned back, and she was a beloved wife and happy mother again. Her heart felt so light and peaceful, as if they had been together for a long time. All her sorrows and hardships were now far behind her, as if in some other life, and now only happiness awaited her. Ginny was transferred to an elite school with advanced English. The girl was an excellent student and showed great promise. Diana successfully mastered the work of a secretary. At first it was difficult. Not everything was going well. She often had to retype a lot of reports and documents. But gradually she got used to it and began to work with flying colors. Victor rushed home, knowing that a delicious dinner and his beloved family were waiting for him. Diane turned out to be an excellent wife, patient, understanding, and very kind. The woman often mentally thanked her late husband. Thank you, Andrushenka, for saving me from doing something stupid, from falling apart, from falling in love. I believe it was you who helped me and Victor meet, and like a guardian angel, you protect our family.